Good morning, my loves. So today I was thinking maybe we could talk about feeling our feelings, because all over there's stuff posted about sitting with it, and it's one of those things, like, if you know, you know. But if you don't know, like, who is taking the time to break this down to people, right? Because we don't learn it as kids. We don't get any instruction on how to emotionally regulate or how to process our feelings. And actually, we get a lot of the opposite, right? We get, oh, you're fine. Or, no, don't cry. And we're sort of taught how to stuff things down, how to not feel, how to numb, right? When we're handed a treat or something when we're upset, right? Like, oh, don't be upset. Here, have this dessert or something, right? And that doesn't serve us, right? And it's not holding hostility or anger or like a woe is me attitude, right? That was what happened, because that also doesn't serve us. And right, we're all doing the best we can. We do the best we can until we know better, and then when we know better, we do better. And so what does it actually mean to sit with it? So working in healthcare, I sort of noticed that a lot of my patients were living up in their heads and not really in their bodies, right? They're kind of floating heads, disconnected from their body. They don't trust their bodies. They've been taught not to trust their bodies, and definitely do not trust your hunger. And in reality, right, like, our bodies know things. There's a book called The Body Keeps Score, in terms of, right, the body has memory, the body stores emotions, the body stores trauma, and, right, the body has a lot of wisdom, and we are intentionally disconnected from our bodies and the wisdom of our bodies, right? Like that gut instinct, that pit in your gut, like something isn't right. You know, if you're going to build a whole civilization around exploiting people and their labor, like, it's pretty brilliant to teach them to not trust those feedback mechanisms, right? And so how do we fix that? How do we reintegrate? Well, sitting in stillness helps. And stillness is hard for a lot of people. And so don't feel like you can't do it or you suck at it. Like, a lot of people, when they start meditation, they tell me, oh, I can't do that. I tried it. I'm terrible at it. I can't get my thoughts to stop. And right, well, that is welcome to meditation, friends. The goal is not to get your thoughts to stop. Your goal is to build awareness. It's to build awareness that, number one, you're not your thoughts. Number two, that you can guide your mind back to whatever you want it to focus on, whether that's a mantra or happier thoughts, or just counting, or the sensation of the breeze or the sun on your face, right? Like that warmth on your skin. And so, right, like, meditation is one way to get back into our bodies. Breath work, doing what's called box breathing, is an introductory breathing technique that I used to give to a lot of my patients. And essentially, right, you make a box with your breathing. So you breathe in for 4, for a count of 4, you hold for a count of 4, you breathe out for a count of 4. And then in theory, you would take a 4 beat before inhaling again, but that can be really uncomfortable for people. So just focusing on the in for 4, hold for 4, out for 4, repeat, and do it 4 times through, 4 times a day. And that's what I would tell people to start with, right? And start Number one, reintegrating, because you have control over your breathing, right? So that's one way you can interface with your body. Also, all day long, we're getting all of this stimulation. We're not designed to be in a society that's busy and noisy and stimulating. And so we all have our sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. And, you know, one side of that is your fight or flight side, and the other side is the rest and digest side. So think of it like the gas and the brakes. And so we're like walking around with like foot to the floor on the gas pedal. And the result of that is chronic stress on our system. And so when we do things like breath work, we are communicating to our body. When you take a nice, deep, full breath and you're activating your vagus nerve, you're communicating to your body that you're safe, and you're turning on the rest and digest side of things, like we're safe. We can like calm down that chemical storm we're releasing of all of these stress hormones, which are not good for our health, and help restore balance. Because, right, like the yoga path is about restoring balance. Ayurveda is about restoring balance. How do we restore balance? Because, right, it's balance on every level: energetic balance, emotional balance, physical balance. Because that is, right, like that is the state where we feel best. That is where we feel connected to ourselves. That's how we are able to connect to source. So how do we achieve that? Yoga can be really helpful for integrating back into your body. So if stillness is really hard for you, doing movement that's timed with breath, and, you know, doing yoga really intentionally, where you're timing the breath and the postures, and you're really using your breath, like taking the big breaths to create space, to deepen those stretches and create space in your body. What I love most about yoga is it is about creating space in the body, right? Easing tension that's not serving us, right? It's about release, and yoga can help release stored emotions. So like that old baggage you're carrying, that's one way to release it. Meditation can help release it. Doing pranayama, breath work can release it, because there's all different types of breath work. There's not just grounding breath work, there's also energizing breath work. So if you're someone who has a lot of earth and it's hard to get going, you could do a little bit of breath of fire or energizing breath work a day. And that can really get you up and moving. And so in terms of, right, so back to the sit with it. What do we mean when we're saying sit with it? Well, have you ever had a feeling where you have noticed a physical sensation with it, right? Like, you found out you hurt somebody that you care about, right? And maybe you feel like you're going to throw up. And what do we do with that? We try to stuff it down. We try to distract ourselves from it. We try to run away from it. And in reality, like, can you sit with that sensation? Can you intensify it? Can you let that throw up feeling rise in your throat? Can you just let it wash over you, and like let the irrational thoughts attached to that come up, and then just give it space? Because here's the thing, when you give those sensations space, they go away, right? Like if you can give them space and listen, right? Listen to the thoughts that come up with them and release them, right? And if you can accept that this is old stuff, right? We all have old stuff that's stored. We have old trauma that's stored in our bodies, and what'll happen is, like, you go through your day, and then something that feels familiar to old trauma will happen, and it'll trigger this old stuff that lives within you, and it'll kick up. So when people talk about getting triggered, this is what's happening, right? This old stuff comes up. because somewhere in you, there's this little inner child, or your little ego is like, oh, this doesn't feel safe. We've done this before. Not safe, not safe, not safe. And whatever that old stuff that you stored will start kicking up, and they're old vibrations and they live in you. They can't harm you. But they're just, right, they're trying to tell you like, ooh, this feels familiar, right? That is how our brains are wired. They are wired to try to prevent us from harm. And so it makes a lot of sense that we would store information that previously caused us harm, even if it was psychological. And so it's not running away from that stuff. It's sitting in it. And depending on, right, where you've stored your trauma and what kind of energetics you have, right? Like you might be somebody who always feels it in the pit of your stomach or in your chest or in your throat, or like maybe you feel it down lower, like somebody is like sweeping the ground out from under you. And it's feeling into whatever those sensations are and giving them space. And so, like I mentioned yesterday, like I woke up with like this really heavy sensation in my chest, and I like, now I know what that sensation is. I'm like, oh, grief. Like I'm feeling grief and despair this morning, right? Because it's in my heart. It's in my heart chakra. And like, oh, hello, grief. Like, oh, that's right. The world is a mess right now. And like, thank you for reminding me that it's not all about love and light, that, right, that I have inner work to do, that the world has work to do, that there is still suffering. And not judging it, because it's the other trap we get caught in, right? Grief, bad. Is it? Or is it just information, right? Is it your body communicating? Maybe I need to cry today. Maybe there's some release that needs to happen. Maybe I need extra self-care today. Maybe I don't need to people today. Right? Like, what if we took it as information? And so that would be my challenge to you today is when a yucky feeling comes up, right? The ones that we've defined as yucky. Can you give that feeling space? Can you invite it to tea and ask what the message is that it's trying to tell you? And accept that is coming from a self-preservation place. It's coming from a loving place. It's coming from a younger version of yourself, right? Like the toddler version of yourself that needs comfort from you. You're the only person who can provide it. Because, right, like even though that little inner person was not getting what they needed in the moment, you could give it to yourself now as an adult. And that is very healing and empowering. And so that is what I invite you to do today. And when this stuff comes up, just bring some awareness to it and see if you can release the judgment and see if you could give it some space. And then, yeah, like show a little love to yourself, right? Like, oh, I see you, little me. I hear you're having a hard time today, and right, and I hear all of that irrational stuff you believe, and right, and that's a part of us, and that's okay. It's okay. It's in there, and also we've got this, and we can feel this. We won't get washed away in it. So, yeah, and if it feels too yucky, then, you know, like giving yourself grace about that too. Or if it feels too scary, you know, that's where having a coach can be really helpful, because that's somebody who's willing to sit in it with you, right? Who is familiar with this stuff and can sit in that discomfort. And it's going to be uncomfortable, right? And the other side of that discomfort is some freedom and spaciousness and connection. And when we don't cross the bridge to the other side or go through it, and we stuff it down, it just kicks back up over and over, and we repeat patterns. And so releasing our emotions is the way to break patterns often. And so it's worthwhile, 100%. And you are worth the effort, always. And wherever you're at now is enough. And yeah, and I'm with you, and I'm cheering for you, and I'm glad that you showed up today. I am proud of you for hanging in there, and I love you, and I hope you have an amazing day. Peace.